Greetings my diamonds and welcome to my channel. My name is Xabiso, otherwise known as Miss X, and I speak on all things real estate and self-development. Today I want to speak about mitigating against the risks of being a victim to a property scam. Let's get into it. Okay. So if you are looking at a company online and you've never heard of it, or you have some suspicions that this might be a property scam, so these are the following things that you can do to mitigate against these risks. The first thing is, obviously you'll the first thing you'll do, obviously you would have identified your desired property on a listing platform. Then from that listing platform, there is usually the company or the agency upon which that agent is registered, right? So then the next thing you need to do, you need to correlate the information with the website. Google the company, go onto their company website, right? I tend to shy away from looking at Google reviews, but they are actually quite an important factor, but not a material factor, because people will usually put the bad reviews online and never the good. So first you're going to Google the company, look at the company website, see if that agent corresponds with the agents on that company's website. Once you find that the agent is there, right, then I'm going to need you to call the company, right? Call the company number and not the agent's number to verify whether that agent works there, right? Usually the person that answers an agency's number is the administrator of that company. All you need to do is verify whether agent X works at the company and they have this specific property, right? If that checks through, right, the next thing you're going to do is going to say you're going to ask the administrator, right? Ask the administrator to pass on the message to agent X to call you and leave your number. So you might be asking yourself, why am I telling you to tell the administrator to tell the agent to call you? Because usually what happens is that you'll find that on listing platforms, people have duplicate listings, right? Or clone the listing. So agent X does have the property. They do work at the agency. However, where you clicked, perhaps you are communicating with this agent on WhatsApp, you may have clicked on the cloned listing, right? And that's not actually the actual agent that you're speaking to, but you're speaking to the scammer. All right, so that's why I say go onto the company's website, call the company number, get the administrator, send a message to the administrator and say, administrator, please ask agent XYZ to call me on XYZ number. And that agent will usually call you, and then you ask the agent, remember, my name is X, Y, and Z. We spoke on X, Y, and Z, right? And if that loop, right, if that loop of communication passes through, then you have mitigated yourself against any risk. And if you have done this, if you were speaking to a scammer, you would be able to identify it through this stage. So an important thing that I urge you to never do, never pay without viewing the property, right? Because you could be speaking to a fraudster. You could be speaking to the relevant agent, but when you get to the property, it's not the same property as shown on pictures, right? So this is very, very important. The last thing you can do to check whether an agent is legitimate, you can ask for the FFC number, where they can input that FFC number into the PPRA portal, which will bring up whether that agent is a registered agent or not. Again, these are just a few tips you can do to mitigate against the risk. I mean, scammers these days have become quite smart and clever that they can go through extreme lengths to defraud people of their hard-earned money. The next thing I want to speak on, as a landlord, how do you identify a potential risky tenant? Right. So as a landlord, the credit check is the most important thing you can ever do for yourself, right? You cannot just ask, right, for a salary slip, pay slip, and people say, they'll pay. That credit record gives you the history, gives you the payment patterns of your tenant, right? And this is what that payment history is going to tell you before you place your tenant. Another important thing that I urge landlords to be aware of: anyone who comes on the 7th of the month and say, I want to do an emergency application. Any application which is usually an emergency, it pressures you. And once you're pressured to work faster, you are prone to make mistakes, right? So, and if you're prone to make mistakes, you're prone to overlook things, right? So anyone who comes on the 7th of the month or 7 days after, right, the new month has started, it's usually because that person has been kicked out of where they were staying and now they need to find another place quick. And because they're saying quick, I have the money, I can pay you now, is usually a red flag. And moving on from that, the biggest red flag of them all are the ones who say that they can pay 6 months upfront, right? It's nice and you can get your rental 6 months upfront, but usually those people, after 6 months, you don't get any payment, right? So I do really urge you to get people who pass on a credit check basis, right? So those people who say they'll pay you 6 months in advance, they know that their credit score is bad. They know that they won't pass anywhere else. And that's why what is enticing to you is that 6 months rental upfront. That's the biggest red flag you can ever find as a landlord. Someone who says they're going to be paying 6 months in advance. That usually means that after 6 months, there's no guarantee that you're going to get your money. And getting a tenant out after 6 months is the most difficult thing you'll ever do. So you need to have, right, stricter entry processes, and you need to follow due process. Otherwise, it's going to cost you a ton of money to get that tenant out. And lastly, right, I want to speak about identity theft. Right, this happened to me as well, where someone applied on behalf of someone, and it turns out that someone is not, and it turned out that someone does not have permission, or they've just stolen that person's identity, right? So when a person, right, as a landlord, let's say as a landlord, you don't want to make use of an agency or an estate agent. How can you process an application on your own? Right, first you're going to have to need that credit check done, and that you can do through TPN, but TPN requires you to pay, right? So you might just have to think about getting an agent. Right, then what you actually have to do, they will give you a salary slip, a pay slip, right? And a pay slip has an employee number. What people do these days, and they get very creative, they can create fake pay slips, right? And in that fake pay slip, they take someone's real pay slip, right? Put an a PDF document and change the employee, the contact number. Because when you reference that employer, right, it's going to call someone that they know. right? Are we together? So a prospective tenant gives you a fake payslip, and in that fake payslip, all they've changed, the particulars of that person are correct. All they've changed is the name and the contact number. So what becomes very important as you as a tenant, you need to be, as a landlord, you need to act as an auditor and audit this. So the first thing that you have to do not call the number on the payslip. Google the company and call the company number online. Because what people do is change the number on the payslip. And once you've called the number online, you need to say, I am calling to reference check employee number XYZ. So HR is going to say employee X, Y, and Z is so forth, so forth. And that's the best way in which you can cross-check a reference from a payslip, right? Because these days people submit fraudulent payslips. People can also submit fraudulent bank statements. And unfortunately, because you are not a FFC licensed individual, sometimes you cannot get access to checking the bank statements with the actual bank. So these days people really, they have fraudulent payslips, they have fraudulent bank statements. Sometimes the ID in itself is actually fraudulent, so they actually steal a person's identity, and that becomes an issue, right? So at the end of the day, I really just do ask you, or rather would suggest that you make use of an agent, because an agent is the one who's trained, who's going to do all these checks for you. And today's video is short and sweet and straight to the point, right? Don't fall victim to a property scam. The red flags are usually almost always there, and I've just given you tips on how to identify the red flags. My name is Xabiso, otherwise known as Miss X, and thank you for watching.